Yesterday's vote on the GOP Trump Care bill was not the first time politics and healthcare have intersected, and it hardly will be the last. But when politics and healthcare do collide, we know two things usually happen. Political fortunes can change, often for the worst, and the way you care for your family usually changes also and often for the worse. That intersection, it was the topics I sat down with John Stoehr of the Connecticut Post. We took a look at Connecticut as a state here and some of these consequences happening simultaneously. Let's say the bill is currently produced as it relates with the repeal and replacement of Obamacare goes through for hypothetical purposes. A burden gets kicked. What happens in Hartford? What's the decision, whether it's Malloy or his successor, is going to have to make here to say, okay, what do I do? What are the costs and also the consequences if, you know, I decide to take on this additional burden here of expenses for the health care of my state's residents, or I say, as a lot of states probably will, especially red ones, not my problem anymore. If the feds aren't picking up the tab, why should I?
That's right. Well, in Hartford, say there's this worst case scenario where there's complete repeal of the Affordable Health Care Act. Well, the states are not going, our state anyway, in the state of Connecticut, is not going to be completely left high and dry. What we can do is revive something we called sustanet, which was more or less Romney Care, if you remember way back when Governor Mitt Romney enacted a health care reform in his home state of Massachusetts. It was basically what you expect now with Obamacare, only on a state level. The other thing that Connecticut can do is join forces with other states that currently have their own health care systems. Currently, California and Massachusetts are those two states. So rich blue states can decide to do that. Now, why do I say blue states? What I mean is that we have to think about this in connection with tax cuts. What that means is that a lot of money will be returning to the states. Now, that's an opportunity for blue states. What they can do is, perhaps if they have the political courage, is raise top marginal income tax rates in order to float health care for everyone. Now that's, like I said, that takes a lot of political courage, and right now political courage is not really the forte in Hartford.
Well, talk about what that would mean, because everybody knows Hartford is looking at huge deficits right now. I mean, you're looking at $5 billion by most recent accounts. To that end, it's a gig the next governor that people aren't going to, I'm sure they're lining up for, but they should be careful what they wish for. To that point, John, all of a sudden Washington cuts the corporate tax rate from 35, 36 to 20%. They cut income taxes, whether there's 7 brackets, 3 brackets, whatever it turns out to be. Everybody likes a tax cut, but who's going to bear the biggest burden if, in fact, those tax cuts are slashed? Obviously, the revenues are slashed going to Washington. What happens to a Connecticut, for example?
Well, there's a kind of a double-edged sword here in Connecticut. On the one hand, if you're an owner of a large business, something all the way from United Technologies to a local oil company that delivers oil, you're going to see your corporate tax rate go down to 15%. That would be the marginal top. But at the same time, what the Republicans and the Trump administration want to do is pay for that by eliminating state and local tax deductions. Now, this gets a little complicated, but here's what I mean. You could have your own company and see your corporate tax rate go down, but you would no longer be able to write off on your federal taxes what you pay in state and local. So in effect, your personal taxes would go up because you would owe more to not only the state of Connecticut, but to the federal government. So there's a lot of trade-offs here, and this is why pundits are pretty much unanimous when they say healthcare reform among the Republicans was like the small ball. This tax code reform is a huge deal. It's infinitely more complex because there are so many more people who have a stake in it.
And John, I just think of the optics on two fronts of this. First off, Republicans have always said, certainly the Freedom Caucus, the anathema of the Obama years was the deficits that got racked up. Well, we're going to pay go here as soon as we get a chance. And they've got the House, the Senate, and obviously the White House in Republican control. The premise was they were going to have all these savings from the health care reform that would help fund both the infrastructure and also the tax reform. They're probably not going to get the first one to offset the second one. And moreover, who's going to be getting the biggest benefits? You know, guys in Greenwich are going to be doing terrific over here, while maybe somebody in central Connecticut not so well. At the same time, they could potentially see their health care being impacted. It just seems that the optics of this are going to be something that they may regret, not this, but next November.
Yeah, I think that you've summed it up quite well. The Republicans are between a rock and a hard place. You know, as I mentioned before, especially vulnerable House Republicans who represent rich districts in blue states. The more they attempt to do it and to make noise about doing it in order to satisfy some of their voters, the more vulnerable they are to Democrats who can say in return, hey, these Republicans are coming after your health care, and they will continue to come after your health care until you get them out of office. So it's not just between a rock and a hard place. There's a rock, there's a hard place, and there's like a set of kitchen knives as well.
Well, we're going to see here, and that says nothing about freaking out the insurers, let alone also putting the hospitals in an almost impossible situation where we could keep going on this. John, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll take a look at some local headlines, so please stay with us.